deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos last week. Let's get to it. Episode on Colt and Jess. We're starting to see their relationship. Abby says, wow, talking about how fast you're supposed to move on after a relationship is so relevant to me right now. So in that episode, I was talking about how we have a lot of stigma in various different directions about whether or not you should engage in a relationship after a breakup and how soon you're supposed to do that. Some people will shame you if you start a relationship really soon after a relationship. Other people will shame you if you don't start a relationship eventually. And so people have it coming and going, and we don't know what to do as a society, and everyone is made to feel ashamed of themselves. And what I was saying in the video was that we need to remember that everyone has their own path when it comes to recovery or grief or moving on or looking for another relationship. And we can't really tell just by looking at how fast someone engages in another relationship as to whether or not it is healthy or unhealthy for the person. And life is messy, and we all need companionship, and it's okay to date. It's just important to know yourself, know your needs, and also tell other people where you're at. You can tell someone, look, I just got out of a divorce. I don't know if I'm really up for a long-term relationship. I just wanted you to know that. So if that's a deal breaker to you, that's fine. But I'm just looking for some companionship, looking to date some people, looking to get to know some people, looking to have some fun, and maybe meet my soulmate, my next soulmate, if you will. Just being honest. Anyway, so Abby says, wow, talking about how fast you're supposed to move on after a relationship is so relevant to me right now. I am recently out of a relationship and struggle with this idea a lot. I don't like to be alone, so being open to a relationship again is so tempting. I think I need to slow down, however, especially since I still haven't fully processed the significant loss of the relationship. Thanks for helping me think about this. Yeah, that's the point, is listen to yourself, explore yourself, think about what's going on there. We can imagine someone soon after a breakup, because they don't want to look at themselves and they're having a really hard time with their feelings, that they might distract themselves through relationships, romantic relationships or dating relationships, sexual relationships. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, it depends really on the person, and so we just have to look at it. So it's just important to pay attention to what you need, and also understand that there's time. You don't have to rush into things if you don't want to, but if you want to, it's also fine. And we as a society need to not stigmatize people just based on limited information. Tariq and Hazel videos. Marie says, a video without any yikes from me. It was a very sweet moment. It's good to see people getting along on this show. It is so rare. Yes, so we are seeing Tariq and Hazel getting along. We're seeing Hazel getting along with Tariq's daughter. Janelle says, Hazel handled this meeting with the daughter beautifully. She just seemed so open, loving, and warm. Shout out to TLC for showing a father who was 100% involved with his child. Agreed, Janelle. Another person on YouTube said, I co-sleep and bed share with my toddler and intend to co-sleep and bed share and room share with her for as long as I can. It feels like the safest, easiest, most natural choice. Right. So I was talking in the episode about how we will stigmatize various different styles of parenting one's children. There's a lot of different ways to raise healthy, happy children, attachment secure children. And one of the ways involves having the child stay in the bed with you or even in the room with you, as this person is saying. It just depends on the kid, depends on the family, and we just need to understand there's a wide variety of options there. And we need to be responsive, particularly to children. Some children are fine living or sleeping in another room early in life. Some children are not, and we just need to be okay with that. It's fine. In the same way that some kids take a little bit longer to learn how to walk, some kids take a little bit longer to learn how to talk, some kids takes them a lot longer to adjust to preschool or kindergarten, and we all understand that. Some kids just adjust quicker or they're more ready for that sort of thing. Some kids aren't. In the same way, particularly special needs kids like Ari, we understand that some kids are probably going to need, and we should help them by having them sleep in our beds at night so that they can feel secure and safe. Jasmine says, I have an autistic 4-year-old, and in the middle of the night when he wakes up, he often comes into our bed. It's no big deal. Yeah, good. All right, Mike and Natalie videos. Mai says, when we saw his reaction to her announcing she was coming, it struck me that he had already closed that door in his mind and wasn't wanting to open it up at all. He left Ukraine very hurt. Right. So the episodes that I'm posting right now about Mike and Natalie are from the beginning of the current season because I was watching the previous season with Mike and Natalie and catching up on that. So these people are reacting to my initial reactions to Mike and Natalie from the beginning of the current season of 90 Day Fiancé. So it's a little bit behind, a few weeks behind. And so this person is pointing out how Mike seems hurt and that he doesn't seem very into it or something in terms of his heart, which I think a lot of people agree. Goosebump says, Mike reminds me a lot of my dad in that Mike shuts down rather than being vulnerable and expects others to fix their behavior before he will thaw again. In fact, Mike is more vulnerable than my dad in that he can at least talk about things sometimes. My dad would just go for a drive for an hour or so, then act like nothing had happened when he came back. From your earlier videos, I modified my assessment of my dad from, wow, he's so cold, to he has an ocean of emotion, he's just not comfortable letting it show. Yeah, music to my ears, Goosebump. That is one of the hopes that I have when you watch these videos, is that we can understand things better. We can understand the traumas that people go through and the ocean of emotion that people have. People that come across as standoffish and cold and robotic, like they don't have emotions or they don't care about emotions, are some of the most vulnerable, some of the most needy people on the planet. Because it's possible that literally from day one of their time on this planet, none of their needs have been met by their family. And so they just learned to shut themselves off from that. Aniel says, summary of the episode. Dr. Kirk loves Beecher cheese and hates the Ferris wheel. So in this, there are a lot of episodes of people making fun of me about how Mike and Natalie are having this intense conversation, and all I can focus on is the things I'm seeing about Seattle and Beecher's cheese. Yeah, I love Beecher's cheese, and I love their, as I talked about, their really good grilled cheese sandwiches on some really good bread. You know, that real good bread that just comes right out of the oven that has a really good crust on it and has big holes. I don't know what kind of bread that is. And then, of course, I don't like the Ferris. I mean, I don't hate the Ferris wheel. I just find it to be an eyesore on a beautiful coastline or beautiful wharf that we used to have. We used to have this skyline in Seattle that was very beautiful, I thought. And this Ferris wheel, your eyes, I don't know about you, but my eyes just go straight to the Ferris wheel every time I see our waterfront in Seattle. I just find that to be bothersome to me. I didn't grow up with the Ferris wheel. I'm sure 50 years from now, people will consider the Ferris wheel to be a beautiful thing because they will have grown up with it, but I didn't. So anyway, Mel says, most of these people on the show are very disrespectful. That's why they criticize, and that's why they criticize the house, the food, etc. I came to the U.S. 11 years ago and would have never made comments like that. Right, so Mel is saying that Natalie is being not fair. Zulala says, the part where you talk about people's expectations of America made me think of the time that I went to China to meet my boyfriend's parents. Right, so I was talking about how sometimes people think the United States, that everyone lives in big homes, everyone's rich, and because of movies and TV shows that they're watching. And so the part where you talk about people's expectations of America made me think of this time I went to China to meet my boyfriend's parents. So one of the first things his parents asked me was, how big is your yard? And they were shocked when I told them I didn't have a yard. They thought every American had at least an acre filled with green grass. It must have felt a little like a bubble bursting when I told them how differently each American life was. Yeah, I hope people understand that. In the United States, there's 350 million people, about, I don't know, somewhere around there. And there's all sorts of homes and all sorts of lifestyles and all sorts of climates and all sorts of living arrangements. And so, just watching a TV show shouldn't give people, Now, of course, Americans will do that too. If you ask Americans what it's like for someone to live in Russia, for example, I'm guessing they're going to immediately think of snow everywhere, that kind of thing. Anyway, Fear says, I'm curious as to why they don't do a virtual house tour on video chat before traveling all the way there. Seems strange to me. Yeah, this is something that comes up on the show a lot. When people arrive in either country, they will be very shocked and surprised about the living arrangements. And then I'm always surprised that they're surprised. And then fear is agreeing with that. It's like, why wouldn't you do a virtual tour of the house? You have video chat. You can just take some, here's my laundry room. Here's how small my house is. I guess you couldn't tell how cold it was. But Celine says, I have to say, as a European, I wrongly expect American houses to be big. Everything seems big from the images we get. Yeah, I'm sure everyone understands that America is a very broad place. Now, if you watch TVs and movies, what you're probably seeing is either New York City or Los Angeles. Almost every depiction is either in New York City or Los Angeles, which always drives me nuts. It's always nice to see like Chicago or Cincinnati or Kansas City or, I don't know, Colorado or something to be depicted in a TV show. It's in Los Angeles because that's where all the actors and directors live, and so it's just convenient for them to do that. Of course, New York is another media hub. But anyway, Sarah says, I wonder if some of the frustration that the newcomers feel is due to the fact that America doesn't have a super strong culture of hospitality. When I live in Korea and was someone's guest, I felt like there was a lot of traditions and protocols in place to make guests feel valued and honored, whereas back home, it is a lot more laid back. Right. So in the United States in general, and there's a lot of variability, but generally speaking, there isn't the sort of hospitality that you will find in other areas of the world. I don't know about every other area in the world. I'm sure there are other cultures that are similar to the United States, but yeah, there are a lot of differences regarding hospitality. And I think that when we watch the Mike and Natalie videos, as Natalie comes to the United States, maybe we're seeing some evidence of that. Miko says, I also never understood how people could only like dogs or only like cats and not the other. Right. So in the video, I was talking about how I don't understand people that say they're dog people or cat people. So if you're saying you're a dog person, you're saying you don't like cats. And then I think, well, have you not met a good cat? Because, cats are great. And this cat agrees. I like cats and dogs. Both are really great. There's a reason why those are the most common animals that people have in their homes, is because both are great. Yes says, Dr. Honda, my husband loves the Strokes just like you. He would like to know what your favorite song is. Well, it's hard to pick. I'm actually in a Strokes cover band, if I haven't mentioned that a billion times. Hard to pick favorite song, but I would say Hard to Explain is usually the song that I identify as my favorite song. It just, I don't know, it's just a beautiful song, the energy, the stop in the middle, the lyrics, the melody, the guitars, the bass, the drums, everything. But another song I like is Under Control. Brandon and Julia. So let's get into those videos. Jennifer says, my fiance used to do hot tub maintenance, and he about died during this scene. According to him, the naked skin is a bigger contaminant than clothes are. Yes, hot tubs are sensitive. The residue from regular washing of a swimsuit is not enough to necessitate draining the tub. Yeah, there are a lot of comments because I asked for any hot tub people. Mesa says, detergent can sometimes have an effect on the hot tub, but is usually not a big issue. The natural skin oils, lotions, deodorant, and soap residue are much more likely to make it cloudy. It's just part of the basic maintenance to deal with these things and change the water regularly. I'm not sure why the mom was blaming them for that. Jane says, I used to sell hot tubs. There is no such thing as clothes ruining the hot tub. Sarah says, former pool and hot tub water chemistry technician here. Wow. We have a lot of experts on hot tubs. This is great. So Sarah says, former pool and hot tub water chemistry technician here. Wearing a clean bathing suit in a hot tub is not an issue. You should be putting a teaspoon of chlorine or bromine shock in the tub per person who uses the tub after every use to prevent cloudiness. Cloudiness in a hot tub is almost always due to high pH, which can be caused by the heating process itself, regardless of who has been in it. Interesting. So thank you for that. That's what I thought. I thought, because of all the people that I've known who have had hot tubs, I never knew that one, you had to be naked, and two, that the water was that much of a problem. Niara says, why is the mom always thinking about their sex life? It's so strange. Right. That's what I've been saying, is that I'm guessing it's related to sexual trauma or societal sexual trauma that the mother's been through. I don't know. Ty says, is it just me who finds it weird that the parents give out to Julia as well as Brandon? Even if both of them did something, it seems normal to me that the parents would pull their son aside and say it to him only, not to embarrass Julia. Yeah, it is unusual. It's a matter of like what's polite, and definitely in my family, it would be very impolite to yell at the both of them when Julia is a guest. Especially since Julia doesn't know what's going on. Brandon is the one who should know what's going on. So yeah, in my family, they would definitely take Brandon aside and not involve Julia. But I think it's just a matter of custom, maybe. I don't know. But we're also starting to see some issues with the relationships, with the personality that might even circumvent custom. Stella says, I think maybe Brandon has learned as a child that asserting himself or admitting to mistakes can create disproportionately strong or unpredictable reactions in his mom, and so he's learned to rather tiptoe around her and try to make himself as invisible as possible. Right. I mean, that's the speculation. We don't know that. There's certainly some evidence of that Brandon has been living under a very stern and highly reactive parenting style that has made him very scared to speak up and even to think for himself. We don't know that for sure, but it certainly kind of looks that way. Alexandra says, my theory is that the parents don't have a good relationship with the other children. So this is actually, some people are commenting on this, is that there are older siblings, which I didn't catch that detail. So they're saying that the parents don't have my theory is the parents don't have a good relationship with any of the children. Brandon was their last hope in taking over the farm as the youngest. They spent much of his life trying to whip him into shape, but in doing so, pushed him away emotionally. Now Julia will be the scapegoat in the situation, how they lost their son and inevitably lose their farm when they get older and can't take care of it. I mean, I guess I do remember them saying that this is the mom's only child, right? But the father has a lot of older children, so maybe this is the father's farm. I don't know. Miriam says, I never can finish watching the Brandon videos. My parents are like his. Right, so there's a number of people actually talking about how watching the Brandon videos is very triggering to them, given their own traumas. That the parents are very similar to the way that their parents were growing up, and their parents were very abusive to them. And that makes total sense to me. Watching the Brandon videos would absolutely trigger that for some people. The way that the parents are very harsh, the way that the parents are very stern, how they don't listen, how they seem to be just completely kind of in their own world. They don't really extend themselves into other people's experience. They don't apologize. They don't seem to really care about the other experience, the experience of other people, or even what Brandon really wants. And that can be the tip of the iceberg in terms of a lifetime of much more harsh behavior and maybe even just flat out abuse. We don't know that, but watching this could absolutely resemble at least that public side of one's parents, and behind closed doors, you were actually being abused severely. And there's a lot of things that we watch in these shows that can be triggering to people in a variety of different ways. And it's important that you, one, monitor yourself on that. And if you don't know how to do that, get a therapist to help you. And two, that you take care of yourself, as I always say, that you know your triggers and you know how to respond when you have those triggers. A good way of monitoring that is to know your emotions and know how distressed you are. Some people, due to trauma or neglect, they don't really know their emotions very well. And so, again, it's important to get therapy for that. Therapists can help you with that. It takes a long time, but it's worth it for sure. But you take notice of your distress level. One of the markers, I guess, could be just how angry you are. I imagine that the first stage of being triggered is anger for some people. Of course, and some people, upon being triggered, will dissociate. There's various different responses, but one way to monitor it, if you don't dissociate, I suppose, is to monitor how angry you are, how just rageful you are at some people in the family, because it could absolutely be triggering you. Now, there's various degrees of triggering. We have severe triggering, which I'm talking about right now, which you need to just turn off the show and even these reaction videos. But there's another level of being triggered where it's perhaps mid-level or moderate or even mild, where you're still having distress, you're still having a trauma reaction, but because your trauma was either not severe enough or you've worked on it enough, your reaction isn't that strong, but you're still having a reaction, and you have to take care of yourself in that, which means, sometimes just pausing it or just taking some deep breaths and reminding yourself that you're not in that situation and it's just a TV show. I mean, it is human lives for sure, but we need to stay differentiated from that. It's just like, well, they have their lives. They're responsible for taking care of themselves. It's not my responsibility. It's not affecting me. Sometimes it's important to remember that. Britt says, Dr. Honda, you explained Brandon's issues so clearly, and I really feel like I understand people like him a little bit better. That said, I still can't help but be incredibly frustrated by him. It's so aggravating to watch. Right. So knowledge is half the battle, as G.I. Joe said. Having insight into something helps for sure. When we understand people better and have a more well-rounded, what I would say accurate conceptualization of why someone would be doing something strange, like the way Brandon acts, I think it compels compassion towards the other person. It helps to understand, because sometimes behavior just looks so strange. And that's why I love psychological theory, particularly psychodynamic theory and attachment theory, because it explains so much weird behavior in other humans. Anytime you're just boggled at someone else, like, why in the world would they do that? There's usually a pretty good explanation when you apply psychological theory to people. And when I understand people better, I feel more relaxed, because prior to understanding people, I'm like, is everyone just completely nuts? Can I not depend on anyone to think rationally? And when I understand people better, I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. But that's only half the battle, because it's still bothersome, right? Just because you understand it, just because you might have a little bit of compassion for someone, that doesn't take away that something bad is happening. So depending on where the aggravation comes from, if it's just aggravation with another person of just like, oh, come on, people, that's one thing. But if it's getting under your skin, that's because of your relational traumas in your own life, and it's important to heal from that. As a therapist trainer, as a professor, one of the most important things that I try to provide my trainees is an opportunity to reflect on the wounds that they have, because when we encounter clients and some of them are going to trigger those wounds, if we don't have some awareness around that and some healing around that and a way of managing that, then we're going to, one, be very distressed as we're treating clients, but also we're going to get triggered in a way that countertransference issues are going to come up, and we're going to potentially harm clients. At the very least, we might neglect them, but sometimes we might even harm clients with our reactivity to them. And so it's very important to become aware of things and to try to heal from that, so that when things are coming at us, we have a management system. The research topic is not how to get rid of countertransference. Countertransference is therapists' feelings towards clients, generally speaking. It's not a matter of getting rid of countertransference, which the old Freudians were wanting to do. It's a matter of managing it, because you can never get rid of countertransference. We therapists are subjective creatures. We have our traumas and our issues and our biases, and there's zero chance we're going to get away from that. There's zero chance that we're going to not be a human being and not have a human mushy brain between our ears. A flawed brain at times, and that's okay. But the point is not to deny that or try to get rid of that, but to acknowledge it and manage it. And managing has to do with awareness, healing, and having a system, a very deep understanding system. Just as a side note on this topic is I have certain feelings in my body that I will take note of that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't done a lot of personal work on figuring out what my emotions were trying to tell me and what they felt like in my body. As a man, I was taught to try to be strong and to deny my emotions for the most part. And so I had to take a long time to figure out, okay, get in touch back with my body and figure out what emotions are happening inside of me. And once I figured that out, then I started corresponding those emotions with different things that were happening in session and even different personality traits in other people. And now I use my body as a barometer for understanding other people's unconscious, essentially. If someone's being very nice to me, but I feel very scared, that tells me something about their personality. Now, I could be wrong, because I could just be having some indigestion or something, and that's always the key, is that I just never really know. But y'all can do this too, as well, even though you're not clinicians. I know some of you are clinicians, but for you non-clinicians, you can do this too, is getting in touch with your emotions, really getting in touch with how what your body is doing as it's reacting to something, and really accentuating that and understanding that, and then knowing what that means, and knowing how to manage that, knowing, does this mean does this mean I'm in danger? Does this mean I'm happy? What's going on because our bodies are telling us things. It's not always rational, but it's important to listen to that. Anyway, Carmen says, I am a morning person, but that also has a lot of downsides. So I was in the episode talking about how we have to not shame night owls, such as myself, because night owls, like myself, often get shamed for being lazy because they sleep until 9 o'clock, this sort of thing. And there's just a wide variety of circadian rhythm biology, and sometimes it fluctuates over the lifespan. And what Carmen is saying, which I love, is they're saying, well, look, morning people are also oppressed. So let's read this comment. I'm a morning person, but that also has a lot of downsides. I never had the energy to do homework after school when I was ready for bed at 8 p.m. And I was ready for bed at 8 p.m. Social life is hard when you don't have as much energy when you want to go out at night. All my night owl friends are hyper and ready for social conversations, but in the morning, I'm all by myself in an empty bus going to work. Right. As a night owl, and I hang out with other night owls like Umberto. Some of you know Umberto. He's a night owl as well, very much so. And yeah, we would stay out till like 3 or 4 in the morning and be totally energized and wanting to do that. And if you're a morning person, yeah, that's going to be pretty tough. Elise says, I was referencing one of these videos to my boyfriend the other day. I started by referring to him as the therapist I watch on YouTube. He stopped me and said, you don't have to call him that. I know Dr. Kirk by name. So I don't know if I read that comment right, but Elise was in a conversation with her boyfriend, and she was like, so, I watched this therapist on YouTube, and the boyfriend said, you don't have to call him this therapist on YouTube. I know Dr. Kirk by name. So there's a lot of different layers to this. One, on one level, that's great, that I hope that you're taking something away from all this yammering that I do that is helpful, that might come up in conversations with people, particularly in intimate relationships, romantic relationships, close companionate, close attachments. That's great. But on the other hand, this is something I've dealt with my whole life, even before I was on YouTube, where people will take my words and use it against other people. They'll say like, my therapist said that you're crazy, or my therapist says that you need to listen to my feelings more, or something. And although it might be true, we all just have to think about how we're coming across to other people. And one of the worst things that I can think of for me professionally, both as a therapist, a professor, and a YouTuber, is for people to say, Kirk Honda told me that you're narcissistic. I figured out, because I watched this guy on YouTube and I figured out that you have borderline, or whatever it is. That would, I'm sure it happens sometimes, but that mortifies me, because I don't want any of this information to be weaponized against other people. So I don't know. I'm guessing, at least from your conversation, it sounded like it wasn't being weaponized. It sounds like you're just bringing up a topic, which is great. I love that. And I wish people did that more, because in the same way that if I was an expert on, say, hot tubs, you would want other hot tub aficionados to learn from your expertise. Well, I've been studying human behavior and attachment and emotions and reactivity for almost 3 decades. And so I just want to impart a little bit of knowledge to people. And so it really brings me a lot of joy when people find it to be useful. But on the other hand, it really mortifies me to think about it being weaponized at times. Okay, so I made an audio episode on third culture kids. So if you didn't listen to that episode, third culture kids are people that grew up in a family where, so a typical third culture kid life is, say they're born in the United States, and their parents are in the military and they move to Vietnam or something. And then they live in Vietnam from the age of 5 until 10. And then they move to, I don't know, Nigeria or something. And they live there from 10 to 15 or, I don't know. Just they move all around the world. And so their passport says that they are an American citizen. But they haven't lived in the United States only when they were very young, and they don't really remember it that much. And although people look at them and refer to them as an American person, they don't really feel like they're an American, because when they go back to the United States, they don't really feel like they fit in. When they go back to Vietnam, they remember some things, but it was a long time ago, so they kind of feel like they're of Vietnam culture, or at least military Vietnam culture or something. They feel like Nigeria, there's a bit of Nigeria in them as well. And they feel comfortable kind of in a lot of different contexts, but they also feel uncomfortable in every context. There's no home base. And when people ask them, where are you from? They will say, well, that's a complicated question. What culture are you? They'll say, well, that's a complicated question. So it's third culture kid, because the first culture is the parents' culture. So the parents in my example were born and raised in the United States. The second culture is the culture outside the family, which would have been the United States, Vietnam, and Nigeria. And then the third culture is the culture of the child, because the child is neither the culture of the society nor the culture of the parents. So Sharon says, I don't even know, I didn't even know there was a term for that. It always made me feel like I had some type of undiscovered disease for not feeling like I belong anywhere. Thank you for this video. Haley says, I've never felt so seen or heard. I had no idea there was a term for this and that it existed. I grew up in Australia until I was 10. Then I lived in America for the rest of my life with a small amount of time spent in Singapore. I never felt I belonged. I associate mostly with my Australian upbringing. However, Aussies view me as American. Can be quite unsettling. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirk. Heather says, thank you. As a third culture kid, this is something that has been tormented. This is something that has tormented me for my whole life. When I found the words third culture kid, I finally felt connected to something. Tendo says, thank you, Dr. Honda. I'm Japanese, grew up in Kenya, moved to Vietnam and England and Seattle too. I resonated with the unresolved grief and emotional unawareness. Yeah, so I talked about a lot of the research, and there's pros and cons, seemingly, according to the research, regarding third culture kids. Often third culture kids are seen as people who can't connect. They are always upset. And certainly there are some themes around that for some people. But there's a lot of pros, a lot of advantages to these lifestyles, in that you can be very open. You can love to travel. You can have a very easy time meeting other people and making new friends. But a lot of third culture kids will talk about how they just have chronic grief in their life because they had to move and let go of relationships. This can actually be a similar thing even if you stayed in the same country and moved around, or even in the same town, but moved around to different neighborhoods and had to go to different schools, and you had to give up your friends and get new friends. There are some things that can happen to kids in situations like that that can be really detrimental and can give some advantages as well. Listen to the whole episode. I go into all the research and all the discussion on that. All right, well, that does it for that episode in which I react to your comments. Comment below on my comments on your comments on my videos. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really, really do.